Ankit Parakh, who is MD in pediatrics. He is an European Diplomate of Pediatric Respiratory Medicine. He is a consultant pediatric pulmonologist at BLK Super Speciality Hospital at New Delhi. And on my left is Dr. Arvind Bauntra, who is head of the Department of Pediatrics at Saket City Hospital, again in New Delhi. Now, many of you might be wondering that cough, cold, and sore throat, how can you devote 1 hour? What is the need? Everybody knows cough, cold, and sore throat. Even Dadima used to treat. Every chemist, every neighbor, every person in the family says, I'm an expert in treating cough, cold, and sore throat. But it's an important subject. IMA has come out with Cough Sutras. We not only need to know about Cough Sutras, we also need to know about respiratory hygiene and cough etiquettes. Today, it is very important to differentiate between sore throat, cough, and cold for many reasons. We all know cough and cold usually means viral, no antibiotics are required. But the public perception is, oh my God, I have cough lasting for 7 or 8 days, why you haven't given me antibiotic? Or they will come back and say, I've already taken an antibiotic, cough is not going, now change my antibiotic. On the contrary, when they have sore throat, which in children can be a precursor to rheumatic fever, where probably you may need an antibiotic, they say, oh, it's only a sore throat, why do you need to give me an antibiotic? Even when it comes to a public health, most of the school children with sore throat, they are not denied attendance, but if they have cough and cold, they will say, go and stay at home because you have cough and cold. And sore throat may be more dangerous than a simple cold, cough and cold. Flu came, swine flu came, bird flu came, and world over, India over, every house now today know what is called as a flu, then cough and cold can be a flu. But when there is so much awareness about flu, the awareness about sore throat went away. And people started confusing every sore throat with flu, and therefore rheumatic prophylaxis was put behind in a way. So therefore, today our discussion basically will be all about cough, all about cold, all about cough and cold, and all about sore throat in isolation or in combination. And the diseases we are going to cover is flu, we are going to cover viral sore throat, and we are also going to cover streptococcal sore throat in specific, talking about it. And then we will also devote some time on symptomatic treatment of cough. Of course, we are not going to miss TB. Any cough of more than 2 weeks, do not ignore. That can be TB. Some discussion will come on that aspect also. And then finally, we'll discuss about respiratory hygiene and cough etiquettes. And that will cover how to dispose of the sputum, how to prevent cross-infection, IMA policy for a hospital and medical establishment. All those things we will discuss. I start with Ankit. When we say that, I already tried to clarify that sore throat is different from cough and cold. Cough and cold may be with sore throat, but you can have a sore throat without cough and cold. And so, is there any specific thing you would like to say to the children? Because this is basically cough and cold in children, which will some aspect will cover in adults. Which are the types of sore throat? Where you know this is streptococcal and this may be a viral sore throat.
Right. So, as Sir said, cough and colds are usually viral, and you have a sore throat and cough and cold as well. But when you are looking for a streptococcal sore throat, the features which you should look for is one, high-grade fever, which is usually not associated with viral symptoms. So usually these children will not have the cold or the sneezing and the running nose. So if you have a sore throat, a pain in the throat, difficulty in swallowing, with fever and no viral symptoms, so these are the features which are suggestive of a streptococcal sore throat. And when you would examine these children, they would have tonsils which are enlarged, there would be erythema in the throat, and you can find pus points. So these are the features which you would distinguish a streptococcal sore throat from a viral throat.
So Arvind, when I say the red, angry looking throat.
Yes.
Red, angry looking throat.
Yes.
Sore throat.
Right.
Don't ignore.
I'll tell you, one of the features to differentiate a viral from a bacterial from the clinical point of view is that the viral infections tend to involve multiple mucous membranes at the same time. For example, if you've got a coryza, you've got conjunctivitis, and then you've got a throat which is red, but there are no pus points, and the child is coughing a lot, that would strongly point to me to be a viral etiology.
Therefore, I say no, if it is only if there is no cough,
If there is no cough,
if there is no
no
cough,
other
if
mucous
there is no
membranes,
nasal discharge,
the jugulo-digastric lymph nodes are enlarged and tender, children can have a lot of vomiting in streptococcal
so in
throats.
such cases, don't
You
ignore
need-
them. Red
do
angry
not
looking
ignore them,
throat
yes.
with absence of cough, don't ignore.
I think
It
if
can
the
be
pus
a-
points are visible, for though it is not 100% strep, but for most purposes we take it as a strep throat. Ideally, you should go in for a culture.
And these are the people who require antibiotic.
10 days of
Simple-
10 days of antibiotic.
10 days of antibiotic and simple haldi ka pani will not work.
If you give 5 days, you're going to get a recurrence, which is the most common mistake I find in GPs, that to give an incomplete course of antibiotics. I think once you diagnosed strep throat, must give it for at least 10 days.
So if I find red and green looking with the tonsils which is having a pus point, whether
Large
I go,
lymph nodes, tender
I
lymph
will
nodes.
not go for the testing depending upon the
You may give
affordability of the
antibiotics,
test. Start
penicillin group,
antibiotic, penicillin group,
amoxicillin for 10 days.
whatever, for 10 days. Full effective duration treatment for 10 days.
That's right.
That's very important. And if you don't do that, what will happen?
Well, you can have all the complications of a streptococcal infection, and that could include you could have a rheumatic fever as a sequelae, glomerulonephritis, or you could have the toxins itself can cause scarlet fever.
So you can lick the joint and bite the heart.
Absolutely.
So ultimately, you can end up into a permanent heart disease,
That's right.
and which can be absolutely life-threatening.
Devastating.
Devastating with that. So any other thing you want to convey in sore throat?
Yes, we can also.
One is antibiotic. One is antibiotic. Any other treatment, symptomatic treatment?
For a bacterial throat, nothing else.
Antibiotics.
Antibiotics and
Antibiotics. So in antibiotics, no aspirin.
no
Child.
aspirin. Use paracetamol. That is the most effective drug. Do not use mefenamic acid routinely. Paracetamol, if used in doses of 10 to 15 milligram per kg, are usually effective. And we should tell our parents that you do not need to bring down fever to 98. If your fever is like 102, even if it comes around 100, it is comfortable for the child. Use only paracetamol. That is the safest and the time-tested drug.
So only. And what about symptomatic treatment for sore throat to reduce pain? Because most of the people see why I specifically talked about aspirin was because people have an habit. They say I'm having sore throat. Let me take gargles of aspirin. And in children, aspirin is not to be used.
Aspirin is not to be used.
So therefore, don't do aspirin
Don't use
gargles,
aspirin.
which we advocate them in the adults, but
Right.
don't do
I
aspirin
think there was
gargles.
a huge campaign because there was an association between aspirin and Reye's syndrome, and as a result of which most pediatricians in this country have stopped using aspirin as an antipyretic.
This webcast is not only seen by doctors, some public may also be seeing because
So
it's
we should
open.
avoid. We
So
should
therefore
avoid.
We must give a very clear-cut message.
Do not use aspirin as
No
an,
aspirin in children.
unless really recommended by a doctor.
No aspirin in children.
Right. Good.
No aspirin in children. That's the message. If I say unless, then
All right. So
let the doctor decide when he wants to decide. No aspirin in children
I agree with you.
as a logo with that. Now, second thing is that when I say sore throat is not same as flu. Flu is viral.
Right.
Okay, so viral means more than sore throat, either no sore throat or more than sore throat. So what are the symptoms which classify it being a viral? So let's revise again. You said multiple mucous
Right.
membranes.
Now, what I would say is that we should again differentiate between a common cold and flu.
Well, that I'll come back. First
Right.
of all, I'm talking about a viral.
So flu.
Viral
is,
as a whole.
Right. So if we talk of flu, it's caused
Viral.
Okay.
Viral. You said viral means multiple mucous membrane involvement. You will have either a nose
Severe
involvement or
cough.
the eye involvement.
Yes.
Okay. So is there any relation with severity of cough?
Most viral infections tend to have more severe cough. So that is there. But there are multiple viruses that can cause cough and cold, including influenza, rhinovirus, adenoviruses. So there are multiple
So
viruses
the respiratory
that cause.
syncytial viruses all
Yes,
will come.
RSVs.
Normally they say that every change in season, every 2 months, we have ritus, 6 ritus. Every change of season, you can catch respiratory infections.
That's true.
Okay, and today I need to differentiate because even in some cases, dengue fever also can have cough and cold.
Actually, the real issue is that when there's a mutation, what we call not the shift, not the drift, but a shift in the antigenic structure of the influenza virus, then the human body is not able to fight it well, and that's the time when we tend up having
So
mortality.
let me come back again. That what is flu? What is viral cold, common cold versus flu?
Flu to me would mean a high-grade fever, severe body ache, cough, which may be limited either to the upper respiratory tract or you may have a lower respiratory tract infection.
Versus common cold.
Versus common cold, you will not get fever. To me, common cold means no fever and no constitutional symptoms.
So common cold is due to,
Rhinovirus is an archetypal virus.
and there is no fever.
No
Then
fever.
how do you differentiate between allergic cough and cold?
Allergic cough and cold, what you need to do
There
have is
will be no fever.
there are allergic cough. You will get sneezing, predominant itching, that will be there, and also if you were to do a rhinoscopy and look at the mucous membranes, the mucous membrane.
Clinically.
Clinically,
Client comes to me.
It's a clinical thing, and what I can suggest to you, what you use your otoscope, use it to look at the mucous membrane, the nasal mucous membrane. It tends to be pale in case of allergy, whereas if it's a viral or a bacterial etiology, it's red inflamed. So I think we clinicians must get into the habit of looking at the nasal mucosa also. So if you are getting itching, you are getting sneezing.
So those doctors who are doing general practice and are at the moment connected, make sure that you have a otoscope. You learn to see not only the ear but also the nose from the same, and look for the mucosa whether it is pale or red. If it is pale, it is viral, allergic, and if it is red, it is an infectious pathology. You look for the infection with that. So when we were in, I was a part of the committee when the first flu came in the country, and we did come out with a slogan for general practitioners: no fever, no flu. Fever has to be there in flu. In fact, it is high-grade fever.
Yes.
But the one of the dictum came was that if there is no fever, then no flu. It may be allergic, it may be some sort of a viral, but no fever, no flu. That everybody should remember. Now come back to flu again. Let's come back to flu again. When we say flu is in the month of winter specifically, but it can happen any time, but in the month of winter. And in flu also we have variant types of flus. How do we differentiate?
Can I just interrupt over here?
Yes, please.
This whole thing of winters having flu is not true for Delhi.
Therefore, I said
It is
that's what traditionally
actually-
taught, but it can happen
Yes,
at other times of the
in
year.
Delhi the
But-
peak is the rainy season.
Okay.
One is that peak, and the second is around February, March. So these are the peaks of flu in the city of Delhi.
So do you feel that this is the season for flu
This is the
at this
season.
moment?
Yes.
Not October, November, December?
This is the
So
season.
when we talk about the flu vaccine, the new strain will come at what time?
It comes in August, September.
August, September. So this year, has it come?
It has come.
So the new strain has come. So this is the rainy season, and then February.
This is the right time to give it. But actually, you could give it any time of the year.
But it has to be given
Because it's
annually.
actually throughout the year you're going to get flu, but with two peaks. One would be around the post-rain, and the other would be around.
So what is the difference between normal human flu versus a swine flu?
Well, Dr. Parag, would you just take on that?
See, swine flu is a misnomer. It was basically a reassorted
H1N1,
virus.
call it as H1N1.
So it is basically an H1N1. So it was renamed as H1N1. The word swine came because it had some parts of the of
No,
viruses
let's
which
talk
were.
about clinical differentiation. How do I suspect? Is it a simple flu or is it H1N1?
See, there are no specific clinical indicators to suggest whether it is influenza A or it is actually a H1N1 type of virus. Now it has merged, so most of the flus would be H1N1. There are no clear clinical indicators. If you look at data, then the only thing which we found was that in the year it started, when the pandemic was there in 2009, the H1N1 had a higher mortality and it included more people in the younger age group, that is somewhere from 15 to 35, 40. But we did a study also in Kalavati Saran Children's Hospital on children who presented with pandemic influenza and influenza A. There are no significant clinical markers to differentiate.
So why I ask this question is because public is panicked about flu. When they hear that I've got is H1N1, there is a panic in the society. Suddenly the admission rate, the cost of the admission goes up, cost of the diagnostics goes up, the testing goes up, medicines goes up, and there is a panic. And
Yes.
public is ready to pay a 1 lakh treatment for a treatment which costs nothing. For a zero cost treatment, they are ready to pay up to 1 lakh. And My public health message, which I have learned over the years, is very clear that human flu is more dangerous than H1N1 in terms of mortality.
The H1N1 had a higher mortality. That is something which is
Only in children. If I take as a whole,
As a whole, it had
see,
a bit higher mortality when it started. So
as on today, I have to create a fear out of the people that don't ignore even a human flu. That is as
That is
dangerous
true.
as a
As
H1N1. And
yes.
when you have been all the years you have been handling a non H1N1, then why create panic now?
no, there is no need to panic.
But
and
it is today dengue and H1N1 has become such a catastrophe and a panic, and unnecessary investigation, unnecessary admissions, panic, every media reporting. There are 3 deaths of flu nobody will report, human flu. 1 death of H1N1, it becomes front page news. The whole media starts talking about it as if they are going to take care of the whole public health problems.
see,
So therefore, I just need to take out the fear from the people's mind that flu is flu.
yes, flu is flu. It has now merged. So it has been the part of the vaccination since 2009, and the H1N1 virus has merged with the routine viruses. So it is no longer an epidemic virus. It is now an endemic virus as well. And you do not have very clear distinguishing features, and the severity and everything is the same with some degree of higher.
And don't you think that
mortality.
ever since H1N1 mania came,
Mhm.
people started misdiagnosing rheumatic sore throats? Everybody started concentrating, every public started concentrating on that every sore throat, because they can't differentiate between sore throat and cough. And they all, Ayurvedic doctors, quacks, everybody started treating them as flu. Everybody, whether he has a sore throat, they will first go for a H1N1 test, and they will not go for the sore throat rheumatic test.
Actually, in the doctor's mind, a sore throat, which to me would mean a streptococcal sore throat, is a totally different entity from.
Yeah, but in this season, sore throat sometimes he will have even flu sometimes can have sore throat.
Yes, that is true.
So they may not be able to differentiate.
Actually, what
Because
are we worried
we are
about?
only modern medicines are not treating it.
Actually,
People from Ayurveda, homeopathy, naturopathy, cough, chemist, neighbor, everybody says I know how to treat. And I have seen, we did a survey and we did see that large number of testing were being done of a sore throat where there were no signs of flu. And they were going for a flu
actually, as
test.
a clinician, what I'm really worried about is if there are any danger signs. For example, if you've got cough and cold and there is no respiratory distress, the child's saturation is well and good.
I'll tell you why
And
I'm asking
I'm
this
not
question.
worried.
Let me divert you slightly. Why I'm asking this question is, I attended a recent conference 2 years back on the nature of medical sciences. We have been talking about all these years, 6 per thousand is the incidence of rheumatic fever. For every 1,000 children, 6 will develop rheumatic fever. They came out with the data 20 per thousand, though this data was based on an echo finding. Echo sometimes can overdiagnose.
Overdiagnosed, yes.
But they came out with 20 per thousand, and then all of us as a cardiologist started getting worried. What the hell it is happening? 20 per thousand is a number, that means 2% is not taken. Then we started realizing, are we overdiagnosing or we missing the diagnosis? And one of the points which was discussed was that if we do not create awareness about rheumatic fever again, rheumatic fever needs more awareness than H1N1. Sore throat needs more awareness than cough and cold, because if you cough and cold will a temporary phenomena, but once you develop rheumatic fever, you are gone. So
Right.
therefore,
So that's why when you talk of sore throat, you need to have a good clinical history, you need to have an examination and then treatment.
Nobody has time. Let's talk about the GP who is seeing 50
I
patients.
think
a GP is seeing 40 patients in 1 hour.
right.
So there, if you say take a good history taking, he's not like Lord Krishna in the first chapter. He will only listen to Arjun, and a full chapter is devoted to that. So
But
we
I
need to have
guess-
catchy signals. We need to have catchy.
But I think our
signals.
GPs need to be actually very
How
careful.
will they be? How will they be? Therefore, we need signals. We need signals. See, for a
Right.
GP, we need signals. We need a Jugaadu medicine, because if they're
Right.
going to see one patient in 2 minutes, where everything is expected out of them, we need to tell them, don't ignore, don't ignore, don't ignore.
The other point
So
I want to make.
therefore, it says, if there is a cough, it's a good sign, it's a viral. If there is only sore throat, don't ignore, spend time.
Well, even if it's cough, I would say don't you can't ignore a
No,
cough.
ignore means from the purpose of rheumatic fever.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
talking for the purpose of rheumatic fever.
Right.
This is what I'm
I'd
saying.
just like to make another point, which is slightly different, is that there's a lot of misuse of cough suppressants in children.
We will come back. We'll come back to cough suppressants.
So in children under 2 years, we should
Okay,
not
let's
be
come
using-
back. Let's come back.
We should
Let's-
not be
let's
using
come
cough
back to
suppressants.
let's come back to symptomatic treatment of cough. Okay, we'll cover here both children as well as adults. Okay.
I think I'll be more qualified for children.
No, I'll cover that.
Okay.
So we have three things. One is a situation of a dry cough. Okay.
Mhm. Right.
Second is a situation of pure sore throat.
Mhm.
Okay, there is no cough at all.
Okay.
Third is I need a bronchodilator. There
Right.
is a spasm, so I need something which also has a bronchodilator. For something I need a mucolytic agent,
Mhm.
and for something I need an expectorant. These are the four issues to decide whenever I'm treating a cough. Do I need to put any expectorant? Do I need a cough suppressant? Do I need a bronchodilator? And do I need a mucolytic agents?
I'll just tell you from the pediatric perspective, I would be very wary to use a cough suppressant in children. Even the role of expectorants, I don't think is really that strong to use in children. We don't tend to use much of expectorants.
So there has to. I want to talk about it. So let's talk about what instead of saying there is no. Let's come out is don't use cough suppressants in children except for there has to be some situations where dry cough will be there in children. Children doesn't mean 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years. Even 12, 13, 14 will also be a child.
Right.
Somewhere there will be role of a dry cough.
Mhm.
So if there is a dry cough, how do I treat?
Mhm.
So if I need an expectorant, which are the situations I need an expectorant? Expectorant can even be a simple water hydration. When do I need a mucolytic? And when do I need a bronchodilator? These are the four situations.
Right. I think a lot of us pediatricians have been diagnosing a lot of wheezy kids now.
Okay.
I think the incidence of allergic cough has gone up dramatically in the last 2 decades.
Mm.
So a child who's got cough and is wheezing would be a candidate for a bronchodilator.
So cough with wheezing,
I think you should go in for a bronchodilator.
bronchodilator. Okay.
Mucolytics have a very minor role.
Mm.
We do tend to use Ambroxol once in a while, but I don't think it's such a
But in adult, it carries a lot of meaning, specifically in COPD, because there
Okay.
the role will come. Chronic bronchitis
Right.
and COPD, mucolytics becomes very important in
Right.
adults. And what about an expectorant?
I am not very much in favor of expectorants either
There is no indication of using
Exactly.
expectorants.
in children.
Up to 12 years of age.
Yeah.
There's no role of
No
using
role of-
expectorants.
So
I
you're
think
saying-
it's a pharma-driven problem in our country that you've got 5,000 cough syrups. If you ask me, you don't even require even one. You don't require cough syrups in children.
Then what do you give? How do you treat?
So what? If he's got fever, you manage the fever,
Okay.
and if he's got wheezing, you give a bronchodilator. But what I would be looking for are any danger signs. That's what I need to educate my parents.
Explain.
Danger signs would be: does he have any difficulty in breathing? You know?
So for doctors, remember that we are talking about red flag signals in a patient, in a child, where we are managing cough and cold. One of them is there is a increased respiratory rate, difficulty in breathing,
Take a
and is there any number for? Is it in adults
yeah,
talk about fatigue?
it'll change by the age. But I think WHO has done it that if it's a child less than 2 months, a respiratory rate of 60 would be significant. Between 2 months to 1 year would be a respiratory rate of more than 50, and 1 to 3 years a respiratory rate of more than 40 would be
About that?
significant. Then after that, it will come down progressively.
Okay, so a increased respiratory rate depending
It's age
upon the
dependent.
age is age dependent. Don't ignore. That's one. Second,
Cyanosis would be a very,
Cyanosis.
very severe sign.
bluish discoloration of the nails or of the tongue or of the lips. Don't ignore it. And we know that cyanosis basically means PaO2 is less than 60%. Third,
I think tachypnea, and these are the most important things which we should always look for. Then regarding how to symptomatically
no.
manage.
Any other reflection?
Indrawing of the chest.
Indrawing of the chest, use of accessory muscles, whether indrawing of the chest, and that becomes specifically in newborns and in very young children becomes very important. That may be the only symptom of that the child is having a respiratory distress.
And the other
In
is the
terms
general
of
signs.
testing, if they have if a GP has a SpO2 monitor, and we normally recommend that every GP should invest on a SpO2 monitor. In children, you will be able to pick up respiratory distress at the early. In adults, also, you will be able to pick up. You can do 6-minute walk test in heart failure. You can do fitness test. Somebody wants to know whether he can go to the Kedarnath Yatra or Amarnath Ki Yatra, and you can do a 6-minute walk test. It's a good investment for all of you. And remember that in a hospital, they charges. You can also charge. So this can be ethical earning point of view also. So make sure all of you have a SpO2 monitor with you, and it doesn't cost much. Cost is from 1 to 2,000, and that's worth the investment. How do you use SpO2 monitor in children? What are the values?
Well, we can have it in the OPD nowadays.
Values is values.
Values, anything more than 95% would be considered normal.
So anything more than 95% is normal, and what is abnormal? Fall off by how much?
Well, less than 95, 90 to 95 would be a matter of concern. Less than 90, of course, would be quite a
So
serious
90 to 95. So therefore, a child, if you are following it, if it like a PEFR, if you have a child whose values are all the time 95%, and if he comes to you with 92%, and then you immediately get concerned about his breathing, that may be something which is dangerous. Therefore, any child who comes with cough and cold, and if he is fine, but if he is sick, having high-grade fever, monitoring with SpO2 monitoring is not a bad idea. And there is no reason why you can't charge, even if it's a nominal charge, SpO2 monitoring, you can charge 50 rupees, 100 rupees, 200, depending upon what you want to practice. It can be a good source of ethical earning also with that. So we come back to symptomatic treatment again.
Right. So when we are looking at symptomatic treatment of cough, what we can do rationally is that maintain hydration, give antibiotics, use saline nasal drops to keep the nose clear. We can also use something known as a suction bulb. We can gently suction the nose, and that will clear up the secretions. These are the general things which can help. Apart from this, what has been recommended even by the FDA is that we can use honey, especially in children more than 1 year of age. This is something which has an FDA approval for treatment of cough. The rest of the therapies like tulsi, ginger tea, and all these have been shown to be helpful. Also, we do not have any scientific data.
Okay, so I'll come back again one by one. You say first is hydration.
Right.
So hydration is warm liquid, cold liquid, any liquid.
Usually warm liquids.
Warm liquid. So lukewarm victims, lukewarm
water can be
water,
used.
and water is the best expectorant.
Yes.
The best mucolytic agent.
Yes.
So don't be in dehydration.
Absolutely.
Second thing you said suction.
We can use suction.
Again, suction. So suction, what are the things which a GP can make as a suction unit in his clinic
He
without
does not-
investing on a suction machine?
Does not require any suction unit. These are for the parents.
No, I'm talking about first of all at the GP, then for the parents. When a
They
child
can just use saline drops in their clinics. I think that is it.
Okay.
They don't need to suction because it can lead to trauma.
so
of the nasal
what the parents can do then?
They can put saline drops. If it still doesn't clear the nose, then the suction bulb is available in the market with the chemist. It is very gentle suction bulb, even for infants, and they can gently suck out the mucus.
Okay, when you talk about nasal wash, you're talking about putting saline drops or washing the nose with the saline. We in adults, I don't know whether you follow that in child or not, we in adults says that do not douche your nose or saline wash with a iodized salt. Is it
No.
true in children? We
Basically,
need a non-iodized salt, saline solution with no iodine. In adults, we are very particular about it. When you're doing any nasal douche or a nasal wash, don't use the common
We
salt at
tend to
home.
use the kind of brands which are there in the market, which are plain saline.
That is
or
okay. If you
sometimes-
buy it, fine. Otherwise,
Yes.
most of the people take water and put salt into it and start.
No,
cooking it.
not that.
we
No,
do not
no.
recommend that.
I think the pH is also regulated.
So
in
you
these-
wanted a nasal saline solution
Yes,
available
yes.
from a chemist.
That's right.
Don't make your own.
No, you don't
solution.
make your own nasal drops.
Yes. Because in adults, most of the people they make of their
No,
own.
no,
If
no.
they make of their own, then we insist and don't take.
No,
Don't
it
put
has to
iodine.
be the.
Iodized salt should not be there. Then when you say honey, how do you use honey?
Honey, basically more than 1 year, it has an FDA approval. You can use half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon 3 times in a day. This can be
You
used.
take oral honey,
Yes.
and then again there is a Ayurvedic principle that don't boil the honey. In a boiled water, you can add honey,
Yes.
but don't put honey like a tea into the water and then boil it.
Yes.
Because honey can be both beneficial and dangerous for that. Then you say tulsi, ginger tea. Ayurvedic doctors will always prefer, naturopathy will always say, we are not against it. We may or may not have data, but we have no data to say that they are harmful. Whether they are beneficial or not doesn't matter, but if you believe in it, if you have a faith, go ahead with tulsi, ginger, go ahead with the haldi ka doodh, haldi ke gargles, whatever you want to do, but no aspirin gargles in children, which are allowed in the adult formation. Okay.
And I would sum up the cough syrups which you said. There is no FDA approval for any cough syrup, as Dr. Boundra added. Nothing less than 6 years is advocated, except that you can use antihistaminics. They can be used, especially the second generation antihistaminics can be used in children who are less than 6 years. Between 6 and 11 years, the cough suppressant like dextromethorphan can be considered if you find there is no wheezing and no danger signs, and if it is a very dry and irritating cough which is disturbing the child's sleep, then they might be considered, but nothing less than 6 years of age.
So as far as adults are concerned, we do, because cough for us is an important phenomena. A cough of can be tuberculosis, cough can be a viral flu, cough can spread on the infection. When we talk about cough etiquettes and respiratory hygiene, we do talk about suppressing the cough in adults. And dextromethorphan is definitely the only drug which is required to manage the dry cough. When it comes to a wet cough, then you need to decide whether you need to give an expectorant or not, you need to give a mucolytic agent or not, and you need to give a bronchodilator or not. Cough sometimes can be the only symptom of asthma, and so we say all asthmatics do not wheeze, and all wheezing is not asthma. So sometimes only manifestation of an asthma can be cough. I think same thing should be true in adolescent age also.
Yes.
And
Actually, the
older children
incidence of childhood asthma
is
definitely
only
on the
cough.
rise.
So therefore, just don't suppress cough. It may be an asthma. Therefore, asthma in such cases. Sometimes cough can be a manifestation of acidity, regurgitation, and the child or the adolescent is coughing all the time in that phenomena. So therefore, adults, in children, the expert says that do not try to suppress cough in less than 6 years. But after 6 years, yes, you need to differentiate, is it a dry cough or a wet cough? And if it is a dry cough, dextromethorphan you can try. Now, I come back to two more things. One is the cough etiquette, second is respiratory hygiene. In adults, we follow that when you have a cough, and cough can be TB and cough can be viral. Any cough for more than 2 weeks can be a TB. TB is a droplet nuclei, and cough is and a viral is a droplet infection. Droplet means more than 5 micron, and TB means less than 5 micron. And if you are having a cough and flu-like symptoms, then it is a droplet infection. That means the virus will stay in the atmosphere only for a specific distance and for a specific duration.
Right.
Okay. Not more than 3 feet, 6 feet, ideally 6 feet, but at least 3 feet.
Yeah, I think one of the very important things is that GP should practice is hand washing. I think
Yes, droplet infection, hand washing.
Because even fomites can have a huge role to play.
Absolutely.
So before you examine the patient,
Before and after.
And before and after, you must use a sanitizer, which is now so freely available.
So again, I'll come back with a difficulty which often my GP says. This is I have 2 minutes for a patient, and you tell me, they ask me that you tell me that I should spend 20 minutes in washing my hands.
No, it's a 5-second
seconds.
job. 20 seconds.
20
yes.
seconds.
While you're taking the history, you can do that.
I know. That's the message we have to
Yes,
spread.
I think this is a very important
This
thing.
says 20 seconds you want me to examine before and after.
Yeah.
In 40 seconds I dispose of one patient. So who is going to pay for my one fee? So the message is that if you catch infection, you will be in trouble. So
Yeah.
use a sanitizer in between.
I think this should be mandatory.
This should be mandatory.
Before you touch your patient and after you touch him.
So one is that when you have a cough and cold, in the cough etiquette, one is hand washing for fomites, and make sure that all your areas are, your table, your everywhere, your knob of the door, everything is infection free.
That's
And if you're coughing in your prescription pad, the infection will be going along with it to the prescription pad to the other family members. For that. Second is when I cough, how do I cough?
Always nice to have a handkerchief.
But if I use a handkerchief, it's not going to be a disposable handkerchief. I'm carrying the infection in my
But
pocket.
when you touch the other person, you always wipe your hands. That is
No.
there.
How do I cough? Because in adults we say either a paper napkin, tissue paper, or cough in your sleep.
Yeah, the sleeve will be
sleep,
good, yes.
don't cough in your hand, don't cough in your handkerchief.
Okay.
Any change in pediatrics, same.
Well, I think the same would hold true for pediatrics also. I think you can cough on your arm. rather than-
Specifically if it is cough and cold, because in
Yes.
TB it won't work. In tuberculosis, the droplet
Right.
nuclei, then the infection will not work
Right.
with that. So this is anything, and distances in adults we say 3 to 6 feet, ideally 6 feet, but at least 3 feet. In children also it's the same.
It is almost the same because I think the source of infection for pediatric TB are basically adults and not children. So it remains the same. For
No, flu.
it is nearly the same. There is no difference.
So if a child is having in a school program, when the child is going to school, what are the situations where he has to be mandatorily not going to the schools?
Mandatory is that if he is having high grade fever or respiratory distress, and
No,
any
cough,
difficulty
cold,
signs.
sore throat. All three, from my point of view, can infect others. From my point of view,
I think
all
if
three
they're-
can be cross-infectious.
If they are maintaining cough hygiene, then
How will you? In a school, in a class, there is no distance of 3 feet. They don't give you.
that is true. But it will be very difficult to keep children for the entire duration at home. So
Let's talk about ideal situation. Then let people decide. Let the parents decide whether what they want to do. What is the ideal medically indicated condition that if you have a sore throat, for how many days you should not be infecting others, okay, and for how many days in a flu?
I don't think there is any clear recommendation for any cough and cold that for how many days the child needs to be at home. If they're coughing for 7 days, then they can still spread the virus even on the 4th or 5th day. So I don't think there's any clear
And
indication.
sometimes you can have the infectivity even before the symptoms come.
Yes.
In fact, they
That is,
sometimes.
that is not in your hand, but at least if you are coughing, that means.
Well, I think as a
will you
matter
allow a
of
coughing?
initial
will
day
you
or
allow
so,
a-
avoid crowded places, that would be one
No,
thing.
I'm talking specifically school.
Spoon.
Will you allow a child who is coughing to sit in the class? Answer is yes or no. If yes, how? If no,
Like Dr. Parag said, I don't think there are any clear-cut recommendation that the child is coughing, he needs to be sent back home, or the doctor
I am
says.
very clear about it from a rheumatic prophylaxis point of view. Any child with sore throat, suspecting to be a streptococcal infection, he cannot be in the school. I'm very clear public health problem.
This is regarding
I don't know whether you have.
viral cough and cold. What we're talking. See,
No, even in viral cough and cold, if it's H1N1, and when you know H1N1 has more mortality in children than in the adults, why should they allow a child to enter into the school with a suspected H1N1? I have to, whether 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. My recommendation as a public health expert is the day cough is over, you can go.
I think we're going to have a lot of absenteeism.
That's a different issue. Question is a different issue. Question is of a public health guidelines.
I'm
Government may not speak
aware.
something different, but as a IMA, as a medical association,
I don't think IIP has also come up with any recommendations.
come out
Not
with it.
that,
Talk,
any-
talk it over and come
I
out
think
with
we'll come over it next time.
Because that's the question everybody would ask you.
That if there is cough, then you go to school or you
I
don't.
am asking a separate question. Suppose you have asked a child, mother has come to you, and you have asked a child that he is having cough. Okay.
No fever.
With suppose there was a fever yesterday. There was a fever yesterday. In the morning there is no fever, and the mother sends the child to school. They come to you and you say, go ahead and attend. And another person develops H1N1 because of that, and they come to Medical Council of India, State Medical Council, that the advice that this child was given a wrong advice by the doctor. Therefore, my child affected with that. As a expert in council, we will not say the IAP doesn't have guidelines. We will not say IMA doesn't have guidelines. We say we have. It's not a practical problem. There we will only talk about what is ethically right, morally right, scientifically right, and legally right.
I think in that situation you have to first prove it was H1N1.
If suppose it comes out to be then. Suppose it comes out to be then. I'm talking about is as a public health problem. We have to be very clear that.
Also, that so many of the coughs today are of allergic origin. And how are you going to differentiate?
Therefore, said you came back yourself. Fever.
Yes. So,
You came back yourself. Flu is fever. So that means
so
you
it's
have a
not
fever
all
with cough.
coughs.
Therefore, I'm saying now, you therefore say fever with cough, you need to take precautions.
A little more you should be, because that may
Yeah.
be more effective.
Usually, what we, as sir said, usually what we say is that till you have fever, you at least stay at home.
Home.
And after the fever is okay, then the child usually would go.
And
to
sometimes
school.
the cough can last for 2-3 weeks also.
Yes, so
You know,
it
you
is
can
not very
have a cough that-
practical
yeah.
to keep children at home till there is absolutely
Resolution of
no
the cough.
That is, and let me
fever.
add something. See, these coughs and colds are very frequent in young children. See,
No,
they
again,
can be,
again, come back. Again, I'm coming back with specifically two conditions, H1N1.
right.
Okay, if you're suspecting H1N1,
If you're suspecting
if you are going to
H1N1,
say,
then
if you're going to say go
obviously
for a
no.
testing, then we are unnecessarily asking a child to go for a testing, which is not required. I refuse to send my patients for H1N1 testing, not required. Clinically, you know this is H1N1.
I think Government of India has come out with clear guidelines
These are-
on when you need to test them, when you don't need to test them.
Those are for government hospitals.
No,
But
they're
we
for
also
everyone.
practice.
They're
Government, no,
for
government
everyone.
guidelines can never be for everyone because they have never involved Indian Medical Association into that. So they have not involved 2.5 lakh doctors who are GPs into never their guidelines. We have never been a part of those guidelines. So those guidelines are
but
by the
they're
government
quite
sector, by the
practical.
government experts for government hospitals.
They're very practical guidelines.
No practical or no practical. I'm talking about is if
You
they
see,
are
but-
guidelines, these types of issues which I am raising,
See,
they will never raise.
GPs face a different kind of pressure.
So therefore, 80% of the people today, doctors are GPs.
Yeah,
70
so
to 80%.
in that case, of course, you may need to do, for example, there's a person who wants to get H1N1 tested and you're a GP. Whether there's an indication or not, a GP will probably go and
Not
go
necessary.
ahead.
Not necessary.
By and large,
That's not our
they would.
recommendation is. No, that's not our recommendation.
But then you have to follow some guidelines.
No. I'm saying, let's not go into the controversy. Our thing is very clear is that if you're suspecting H1N1, you need to give them a public health counseling. Even if you are sending them to the school, give it with a public health counseling. What are the chances of you're spreading it to the others? That's all. Then you take your call, then you take a
If
decision.
you're
on it.
suspecting influenza, then we're fine.
Influenza or rheumatic fever. If you're suspecting H1N1 or a rheumatic sore throat, you need to give a public health counseling to the person to whom you are treating.
Actually,
That can
the,
be a-
the viral ones are very infective. There's no doubt about it. There are certain situations I would be really worried about, though it doesn't involve the GP. As for example, we have situations in the nursery. In the nursery, I would not permit anyone, if any of the nursing staff had a cough and cold, to come in close to.
Okay, we'll come back because only 10 minutes are remaining. Let me come back to another thing is when we talk about respiratory hygiene, that cough for more than 2 weeks can be TB. If a child is entering in a reception, there are work etiquettes, atmosphere etiquettes. Atmosphere etiquette is that a child or an adult is coming to the reception with cough, he should not be made to stand in a line. He's standing for 15 minutes for his turn. And during this period, he's going to cross infect. Two, he has a fundamental legal right and of getting a mask at the reception. If he's going for an X-ray or a lab test, and if he's having cough, he has special privileges. These are called cough privileges. A person with a have cough have some privileges of getting a mask, not standing in a line, getting specifically directly going for X-ray and coming back. These are international guidelines, and IME is recommending them.
All right.
Are they applicable to children also?
Well, in a sense, yes, because children are no different from adults. In fact, they are probably more vulnerable to respiratory infections. But
There are two IPC sections which most of us are not aware. And these are spreading infections to the society. And there is an imprisonment of in years, 2 years, 3 years imprisonment with that. That means if in my setup I'm allowing infection, cross infection to others, and if there is a complaint, I can be put behind the bar. Similarly, if you have an open TB case who refuses to take treatment, then he's at risk to the society, he can be put behind the bar. So we have legal protections and legal sections in Indian Penal Code, which normally nobody reads, nobody talks about it, but today people have started talking about it because Delhi has 150 XDR cases and 1500 MDR TB cases. 150 cases in Delhi of XDR. So therefore, if they don't take treatment, somebody has to force them to take treatment.
actually, when there's a high infectivity, let's say that there is the endemic flu and the epidemic flu, or the flu which has high mortality, then as a public health order, many of the things that you say make sense. You know, when you have a flu epidemic and the mortality is 5%, 7%, obviously it makes sense. In an endemic situation where every second person is coughing, I don't know how.
They are
much
coughing
we can-
because we are not taking public health problems. If you are going to allow them in mixing up in various areas, if a person is coming with a cough, is
makes
allowed.
sense, but yeah,
If a person with a cough is allowed to stand in a bus or in a train, and if he's coughing and somebody else says, "Hey, why you are coughing?" He says, "None of your business," and we are not reacting, then every second person is
I
going
think
to
what you're
cough.
saying is a fantastic idea.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely utopian. In India, we've first got to ask people to stop spitting also.
Yes, I'm
Just,
coming to that. How do you spit? That if I want to spit, how do I do it? That's my next question. You just prompted me. if I want to spit, if I have a cough with an expectoration, what do? Where do I spit? So there has to be some.
There are ways to go about it. You've got to put it in tissue paper. It has to be disposed of in a proper way. It can either be sent as a biological, since you now are segregating. This will be a hazardous part. It can
At
go
home, that is in the hospital setting, in a GP setting. At home, what do? Should I just sink it? Should I throw it on the garbage? Should I?
You're supposed to collect it and you can incinerate it. Okay.
Nobody will do that at home. So should I use my phenyl from my bathroom?
Dr. Parak, could you tell us how would
Bleaching,
you
most of the people,
You've got a
they will have
pharmaceutical-
either bleach or a phenyl at home. Every home will have. So they can take a container and put little bit bleach or a phenyl and go and spitting into that. That's what we suggest to the GP patients. Same thing can be suggested to the patients with flu.
Fortunately, in children, they are
Usually they
usually
don't have
not the
expectoration,
open
yes,
cases. That's ours are the possibacillary kind of thing.
That is the
Difference
main
between
difference.
adult and pediatric.
Okay, let's spend some time on cough as asthma.
Right.
Cough, just tell us something about cough, asthma presenting as cough in children.
Uh, if you find a child who is having recurrent episodes of cough, so one thing is that the episodes are recurrent. So the child has episodes of cough which are lasting longer than usual, so lasting more than 7 to 10 days. And this recurs frequently, especially during the viral seasons, then this is one pointer. The other pointer which you should be very careful is that what happens in between episodes. If a child is having a cough and cold, is prolonged, settles in 2 weeks, remains well for 15-20 days or a month. What happens in these 15-20 days or a month? If they have activity related cough during laughing, running, jumping or exercise, then these would be the pointers. The rest would be your clinical examination, that whether during the episodes they get a wheezing or their chest remains clear. As initially said that obviously all asthmas may not wheeze, and you can have cough variant asthmas, but in children more or less you would at some point of time you'll find that they would be wheezing. So I think clinical examination is quite important. Recurrence, look at recurrent. So any child who has more than 3 episodes, be careful. Look at the activity. Look at whether they are sensitized to aeroallergen. So do they get worse with cigarette smoke? Do they get worse with perfumes, deos?
So okay, can I say non-responding cough rule out asthma?
Yes, definitely.
In a non-responding cough, before thinking of that,
Non-responding recurrent cough.
Not
definitely.
responding
Personal
recurrent.
history of atopy would also be a
History of
pointer.
atopy, a family
You've got an
history of
atopic
asthma,
dermatitis or a family history.
of
And
asthma.
asthmatic
Asthma.
coughs are not infectious.
The infection can trigger it, but they are not.
non-infectious to others.
Yes, they are
Not
not.
contagious.
Infectious.
Similarly, allergic coughs may not be contagious.
Yeah, they're not.
If you have, they are not contagious with that. Now, when about chronic acidity can cause?
Well, there is
cough.
some relationship. It's GERD can cause worsen your asthma. And that of course is known. And more than that is what they now talk of one airway, one disease. So that you could also have an allergic rhinitis. And sometimes those children who don't respond to medications for asthma, sometimes you need to treat for comorbidities, which could be allergic rhinitis, sinusitis, or sometimes even
Okay,
GERD.
we have a couple of minutes left. Come back to the flu policy, vaccine policy in children.
Well, the Indian Academy of Pediatrics has taken a stand which is very different from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Indian Academy of Pediatrics has not put the flu vaccine as a routine vaccine. It's only to be given in very special circumstances. Whereas in the American Academy of Pediatrics, they are using it as an annual shot over there.
So, when you're talking about special circumstances, talking about
Well, especially it could be a child with
Asthma,
asthma,
kidney-
nephrotic syndromes, who's on some immune suppression.
suppression,
And these are the ones who would be candidates for, or an epidemic. Then
the dose same or
but it changes. For example, this would be interesting for GPs, that the adult dose is for children over 3 years. In fact, if you talk of flu vaccine, you have the live attenuated influenza vaccine. You also have the nasal vaccine, which is available, which is to be given to children over 2 years. Whereas the live attenuated vaccine, the pediatric dose is from 6 months to 3 years, and after 3 years we give the full adult dose, which is 0.5
there were
ml.
some studies from the US itself and many other countries that yearly vaccine may not be cost effective. even in the private sector. Even in the private sector, they said divide the dose into two. Take one vaccine and give it to two people. Half dose is as good as full dose.
And you keep getting studies. I haven't gone through that study, but we would give the full dose in India.
And we're not recommending yearly shot, as he said. We're not recommending yearly shots for all children.
What about pneumonia vaccine?
Well, in our own private practices, we are giving for pneumococcus. We have the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine.
Which one you're giving? 23, 13?
No, in children we tend to use a 13 because the 23 is a polysaccharide vaccine. It's not a conjugate vaccine. And as you know that the conjugate vaccines, they are T-cell dependent and they give you long-lasting immunity. So we tend to use the PCV 13.
13. In adults we give both. Give 13 first and after 6 months give 23.
Right.
23 valent has specific indications in children. So it is required for
But
children.
otherwise you're basically giving 13.
Yes.
Every 5
So-
years?
No. So the PCV 10 or PCV 13 is starting during infancy. So starting at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks, and boosted at 15 months. So
Then
then no further pneumococcal vaccination is required for normal healthy children. The 23 valent vaccine is recommended only in specific situations in children who are more than 2 years of age, in children who are immunocompromised, in children who are
no, if suppose a 14-year-old boy comes to you and
Right.
he needs a regular pneumococcal vaccine
it is not recommended.
and he hasn't taken any,
No pneumococcal vaccine is actually recommended after 5 years of age. It is on the
I
23
think
valent.
IMA should talk to both API and IAP and we should come out with some government guidelines because there is
No.
some confusion. No, there is because
So the IAP stand is
least-
clear. IAP stand is
I
clear.
think what
because,
Yeah, this
because we still recommend that pneumococcal vaccine is required
No,
every 5
this-
years.
after-
if you are
This is
after
the
the age of
CDC
12.
guideline as well.
After the age of 12.
No, this is
No,
the
I'm only
CDC.
bothered about after the age of 12.
CDC guideline
Right.
and the ACIP guideline is the same as the IAP
Therefore,
guideline.
therefore, I'm saying is, I'm not talking about, I'm not into the controversy. I said, in my practice,
Right.
this is what I'm following. If I'm doing it wrong, then nobody has corrected me. Then the very fact nobody has corrected me, that means there are no standard. 3 organizations have not sat together.
you get different guidelines from different authorities. IIP would be different from Government of India, and so there are variations.
There should be one guideline for practice. They are called practice guidelines. But
Actually, the most practice-friendly
practice
guideline
friendly
is
means
the American Academy of Pediatrics.
practice
people who are
guidelines are
GP.
called practical guidelines, which should be followed. Unfortunately, today private sector is being said that you have 60 different protocols for TB management, and now IMA is coming forward with a document on a standard IMA stamped document. Follow this.
Right.
Okay.
It's
That
all a
is,
question
we
of
will take care of-
credibility. Yeah.
Say similarly in vaccinations, the time has come for IMA to intervene, and they let IMA come out with this is what IIP says, this is what Geriatric Society says, this is what API says, this is what Diabetes Association says, this is what other people says. Then the IMA come back with a consensus statement. I've studied all of them, and this is what.
Actually, we have a whole committee on immunization, and the resolutions change every 2 years. So what was true 2 years back, it keeps changing all the time, much to the detriment of practicing doctors because they have to
Which
upgrade their
shouldn't
knowledge.
happen. Which shouldn't happen. The policy shouldn't change so often with that. Which shouldn't happen. And if it happens, it must be communicated to all people. And forget that IAP is not only pediatricians. Large number of GPs are also treating. And as far as the vaccines are concerned, even I am a GP. I may be practicing cardiology or medicine, but I am a GP for other diseases. So if somebody comes to me, I won't say that I don't know about vaccination policy. I need to. So therefore, everybody needs to be communicated to that. So this is the 1 hour is full over. Let me come back with 5 take-home messages today from both of you. See you in
Well,
the
for
camera.
respiratory infections, I would strongly recommend that hygiene, hand washing is such an important thing. Regular, if you have a cold and cough, don't ignore it. Go and meet your doctor, your GP. Vaccinations have a huge role to play. And I think when you're talking about respiratory infections, measles, influenza, pneumococcus, all these have a great role to play. And that would be my message to the GPs.
Okay, my message would be that avoid antibiotic abuse. This is something which IAP has come up with. If you think it is a viral cough and cold, do not use antibiotics. We are really short of antibiotics. That is one. Second, for streptococcal sore throats, please use amoxicillin or penicillin. Because penicillin B is not available, please use amoxicillin. That is the drug of choice. Even for pneumonias, the drug of choice remains as amoxicillin. Similar for otitis and sinusitis. Please do not use comoxiclav for all these things. It is going to increase the resistance rampantly. So that would be my message for everyone.
So remember the slogan, cough on, play off. Play on, cough off. That means if you have cough, the child may not be able to play. Don't ignore cough in children, whether it is viral or bacterial. Don't ignore it. Look for it. It can be asthma, it can be acidity, it can be because of TB, it can be because of allergy, it can be because of viral flu, it can also be because of rheumatic sore throat, which can lick the joint and bite the heart. And always make sure that do not misuse antibiotic, have a rational use of antibiotics. You can use all symptomatic treatments. And if you need cough suppressants after the age of 6 years, look for dry cough suppressant. And if you have a wet cough, look for need for a bronchodilator, for a mucolytic agent, or for an expectorant. And you can continue using your local Dabimark and Luxe as far as that is concerned. But my last message is very clear. Do not ignore cough of more than 2 weeks at any age, because this can be TB, and we are concerned about TB in the country because TB is, we have already having MDR, XDR tuberculosis, and practice cough etiquettes, respiratory hygiene. Anytime you see a patient with a cough, always think of, is he likely to spread the infection to others? If yes, what precautions you are taking? And if he's coming to your setup, make sure he gets a mask from you, a surgical mask from you. He doesn't need a bigger mask, surgical mask for you. And he needs other things, all the other precautions he needs from you. And that's all from today. And we thank our speakers, Dr. Ankit Parak, as well as Dr. Arvind Bantra, for joining us in today's program. And I thank Johnson & Johnson's group. It's a part of IMA Johnson & Johnson initiative, where we're talking about cough. We may also be coming out with them on a public health campaign on cough in a radio modality, TV modality. We are also going to have on 13th of September a 23 location CME, which will cover 50% of this cough and cold, where doctors from all across the country at different 23 locations, BSNL centers, will be interacting with us with that. That's all for today. We'll come back with one more session next week on the next Thursday. And being a dengue season, next Thursday our topic will be on vector-borne diseases. And we'll have all the experts for vector-borne disease. Till that, goodbye, and we'll meet you again. Long live IMA.